And for more on the Trump campaign's mounting legal challenges, let's bring in CBS News White House correspondent Ben Tracy. All right, Ben, so you heard a bit of what we were saying with Caitlin. On one hand, Trump supporters and the president are saying stop the vote counting, and in other places they want the vote count to continue. But they are suing to stop the count in Michigan, where CBS News has projected that former Vice President Joe Biden is the winner. Over to Pennsylvania, it's trying to stop the count there, where the president currently holds a narrow lead. What is the Trump's campaign? What is the argument for filing these lawsuits and having this sort of schizophrenic approach to the various states where they appear to be winning and in the states where they appear to be losing?
Well, on that second point, they don't really even bother justifying that. They're basically going after the votes that they think are going to harm them. So that's why you're seeing them wage these legal battles in places like Michigan and Pennsylvania. Their arguments fall into two kind of different buckets. One is access to seeing the ballots being counted. They're saying that we want more access, more transparency to see if these ballots are actually being counted fairly. What's interesting about that is there already are bipartisan poll workers in place in these states to do that very thing. So they're basically asking for a remedy that already exists. But the goal here is to really cast doubt on the process itself. And then there's this issue of fraud. The campaign has made these unsubstantiated allegations that there is widespread fraud with the ballot counting in Pennsylvania, in Michigan. We've seen the president tweet out that they've been secretly dumping ballots in Michigan. There is no evidence of that. He has not even offered any evidence of that. And then in Pennsylvania yesterday, you saw the president's son, Eric Trump, get up in front of a crowd there and say this is fraud, this is not democracy. There's also no evidence of that. So, they are waging these lawsuits. They're intending to announce another one this morning in Nevada, where they're going to accuse Nevada basically of allowing 10,000 people who no longer live in the state to vote. So I think we should expect this to go on in the places where they feel the outcome is not going to end up in their favor.
And in fact, the president's legal team has already lost a battle here in Pennsylvania, and they filed an appeal. What they want to see happen is they want mail-in ballots that are received after Election Day, but postmarked for Election Day, received by Friday. They don't want those ballots to count. They already lost that battle once. They are appealing and hoping to take it to the Supreme Court. What is the possibility of that happening?
It's possible that, it went to the Supreme Court, and it basically was a 4-4 decision where the Supreme Court said that it was not going to overrule that change in the law there in Pennsylvania. But some of the very conservative members of the Supreme Court signaled that they would be willing to hear this argument again and rule against it. Obviously now, since that ruling happened, we now have 9 members of the Supreme Court, including Amy Coney Barrett. She has not said that she would recuse herself from any of these cases that involve these election challenges, even though she was just put on the court after being nominated by President Trump, one of the candidates who is bringing these lawsuits. So we'll have to see how that plays out. There is the question of whether or not those ballots would really matter if Joe Biden, they're counting these ballots currently, these ballots that were actually received by Election Day. If he takes over a big win there in Pennsylvania, which some people who are looking at the math say is quite possible, these other ballots may become moot, but certainly you should expect the administration, or the Trump campaign rather, to keep pushing for the Supreme Court to intervene.
Ben, let's talk about Wisconsin. The president and his campaign continues to push for a recount there, where former Vice President Biden is the projected winner. They are citing reports of they're citing reports of things that they haven't been able to prove in several counties there. And over in Georgia, the campaign sued election officials in Chatham County, alleging that ballots arriving after the 7 p.m. deadline may have been mixed with eligible ballots and improperly counted. In Wisconsin, which I think is interesting because it's already been projected for the vice president, we had the former governor, who's a Republican, Scott Walker, on our air. And he's suggesting that even if a recount happens, the margin of votes between Biden and Trump is something like 20,000, which would really be a high hurdle for the president to overcome. But have you, in our reporting, have we been able to find any evidence of, something that is fishy in either of those states?
No. And in fact, all of these allegations of fraud or irregularities, the campaign has offered zero proof for them. They just kind of put the allegation out there, which that seems to be the strategy. In terms of the recount in Wisconsin, you're right. You know, the former Republican governor has come out. They have a lot of experience in Wisconsin with recounts because they have a lot of really tight races. So they've been through this before, and typically recounts only turn over a couple of hundred votes. And you're talking right now, the margin that Joe Biden has in Wisconsin is north of 20,000 votes. So that's a very, very high hurdle for President Trump to overcome. It also would be expensive. This is something that the campaign would have to pay for, and they are actively raising money online, asking people for donations to support these challenges that they're making. The other thing is they have formally asked for this recount, but they can't actually really do that for about another 2 weeks because Wisconsin needs the time to actually verify its results before a recount is even a possibility for the Trump campaign.
So the Trump campaign, they're not the only ones with an army of lawyers. The Biden campaign also prepared. What's going on with the Biden campaign in terms of fending off these lawsuits or appeals?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, this is something that both campaigns were well prepared for in the months leading up to the election because they both assumed it was going to be very close and it likely could come to what it now has come to. So the Biden campaign does have its own army of lawyers. They are ready to defend themselves in all of these states where the Trump campaign is filing these claims. And, you know, there are other races that are very close, like Georgia, where you could see the former vice president come up on the losing end of that by a very narrow margin. And then his campaign would have to decide, is a recount something that they want to go after in a state like that. Certainly they're hoping today that perhaps Arizona and Nevada break their way and none of that matters, that Pennsylvania would no longer matter, that Georgia would no longer matter. I think, though, even if the former vice president is declared the winner in the next 24, 48 hours, I don't think you should assume that the Trump campaign is going to accept that and just drop these lawsuits. This seems to be something that's going to go on for weeks and could stretch all the way to Inauguration Day.
Ben, real quick before you go, when President Trump was a private citizen, he sued constantly. That was just sort of a hallmark of the way that he ran his business. So it's not surprising that he's doing this now. The question I have for you is, are you hearing from sources either close to the White House or other Republicans that they're sort of, I mean, if you watch David Begnow's report this morning on CBS This Morning, he was talking to some voters, and he had one woman who essentially said, well, she believes the president when he says that there have been, you know, there's fraud and there's these, you know, things that are happening in states, you know, that the elections are rigged. I mean, the power of his words really do matter, and a lot of people, when they hear from the president of the United States, take those words to heart. Are you hearing from anybody either close to the White House or other Republicans who are sort of saying, you know what, this is getting a little exhausting, having to defend the integrity of the elections of the United States of America, where for the last 100 years, or at least since the post-World War II era, we have been the country that have gone into other countries and told them how to conduct their elections?
Yeah, it depends on who you ask. The folks in the White House, the folks in the campaign, these are the true believers. These are the people who will go down with the ship however long it takes. So they're all in. They're all for this battle because even if the president is not successful, let's say he ends up losing all of these legal challenges and then loses the race, they view this as good PR. It shows him fighting. It shows that they want to keep making these accusations that there was fraud, that this was rigged. But what you're hearing from more establishment Republicans is just let people count the votes and let's see where this ends up. Let the votes be counted and then mount your legal challenge if you think there was fraud and you have evidence of that. So there are kind of two different camps. The campaign obviously is trying to get out in front of some of these states where they are now expecting to potentially lose and call fraud before there is evidence of fraud, because that's a nice way of really then saying that vote is wrong once there is a final tally.
Ben Tracy, thank you. The president tweeting in all caps, "Stop the count," just moments ago. Not sure if he wants it stopped in the states where he's winning or where he's ahead or where he's not ahead. Well, I can guess which states he's talking about. Ben Tracy, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.